Yes. All right. Well, speaking of the list of things to do, that's a very appropriate segue into our topic today, our round table about crowdfunding, because crowdfunding definitely involves long lists of things to do. So before I do the official intro for the roundtable, a few housekeeping announcements. So I see that there are a few new faces in here. So welcome if this is one of your first Kids Comics Unite events that you've ever been to. As you can see, they're pretty casual. So I just wanted to give a short heads up about upcoming events. So first of all, Patrick, who I've been chatting with, is teaching the ongoing Crowdfunding Crucible course, where he's working directly with a few members of Kids Comics Unite on some crowdfunding campaigns that are going to be hosted on Crowdfundr, which is a platform that's kind of a competitor to Kickstarter. And they are doing a special Kids and YA Spotlight event in July. So a whole bunch of people who are doing projects that are specifically geared toward either children or teens as the audience are all going to be on a page together. So it's going to be really fun. And I'm mentioning it because Patrick and me and the rest of the KCU team have been talking about a few ways that we're going to be highlighting some of these campaigns towards the end of this month and next month. So just a heads up to keep your eyes open for that. It'll be really fun. You'll get to support KCU members and also ask them questions as they're like in the thick of it. And these are people who are doing a crowdfunding campaign for the first time. So of course they're really nervous. So as much as we can support them, we should do that. So that is item number one. Number two is that next Wednesday at this time, 12:30 Eastern, we are having a live critique session. This is an event that we hold every month in Kids Comics Studio. But for the first time, we are opening it up to outside, non-studio members to sign up if you want to come and have something critiqued on the call. So basically, we just spend a couple minutes reviewing your work. So you can only show a few pages. And then you let us know what areas you're really looking for feedback on. And then we all discuss it and try to help you out. So that's next Wednesday. Then Gibson Twist is doing his Finding Your Path workshop on Saturday, June 24th, which is going to be a really cool kind of exploratory, getting in touch with what makes your work unique kind of workshop. Did I get that right, Gibson? Okay, awesome. And then I think it sounds like on the final Wednesday of June, Patrick and me, and hopefully some of or all of the people who are doing Crowdfundr campaigns are going to be testing live stream. So we are going to try to make it like a live stream party. So we can tell
Lunch and Learn live.
Yeah, Lunch and Learn live. What's another L that means like things could go wrong, but we're relaxed about it?
Laissez-faire.
Yes. Lunch and Learn live laissez-faire. Okay, that's the title. All right, so today I have Patrick Lugo. Oh, sorry, before I always ask if I have any questions before I move on to the intro. Any questions about anything I just said? Okay. All right.
No questions,
Yes.
Jana, but I just, we're having a Clip Studio thing on Friday too. If anybody's not a member of the Clip Studio Cafe, we do this thing every other week where it's just an informal Q&A, chat and demo stuff. So please feel free to join the Clip Studio Cafe, and there's a Zoom link in there for this Friday at 12:30 p.m.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh, there was a huge lightning flash right outside my window. Okay. Wow. Okay. Great introduction. So Patrick Lugo and Gibson Twist and Stephanie Pizzarillos and Lex Fajardo and Nate Lovett are all here to tell us about their crowdfunding experience. And I know that ranges with some of the people here who've done multiple crowdfunding campaigns. I think, Nate, you've only done one, is that right? Yep. So I think that's awesome. I wanted us to have a range of experience on this roundtable. And so we're going to go run through a couple questions that I'm going to ask everybody. And there's so much to unpack with this topic. And I'm sure you guys have a bunch of questions. So please, put your questions in the chat as we talk, or, write them down so that you can ask. I have a feeling this might last longer than an hour. We will see. If any of you have to leave, of course, we totally understand, but I can stay a little longer than an hour. So anyway, we're going to start with asking each of our roundtable panelists give us a really short introduction about who you are, and then what made you decide to do your first crowdfunding campaign, and how did it go? So let's start with Patrick.
All right. Many of you know me. I see a few unfamiliar names, which I'm really excited about. Patrick Lugo, online as Plugo, author, illustrator, comic creator. First campaign was in 2022, Year of the Tiger, on the lunar calendar. And the reason it kind of aligned with my tiger themed graphic novel that I had been pitching since about 2019, not 19 anything. Anyway, that said, I kind of landed at KCU and kind of looked around, and eventually as I entered the KCU intensive, I brought A Tiger's Tale graphic novel project to that intensive, where I really got a hands-on look at what the market was like right there and then in 2021, and what my graphic novel looked like in comparison to what was being put out at the time. So with all that said, and great gratitude to my critique group, who really helped me refine what would be successful on Kickstarter if I was to go that route. I did, and it was.
So can you tell us really quickly, like, what were you hoping to, or what's the term for it, the amount of money you were trying to get?
Well, my initial funding goal was
your funding goal, right? Your funding goal.
So I kept it really, really low because I just really wanted to have like a premier victory. So I went with 2,222 for the year 2022, and and then just tried to fit my budget to make that a viable goal, and then also with the plan to pay, if I only got $1,000, I'd pay the difference myself. And
so how much did you end up getting?
Oh, just over $5,000. I went to
you way more than doubled your goal.
It was 294% of my goal. So that was an eye-opener. And the main takeaway was that I seriously underestimated my my reach or my audience. And so I really had to look at like, what am I, there's the one side of spreadsheet stuff, which I'm still figuring out, but then there's the other side of like an intimate knowledge of who my audience is, which I'm also still figuring out.
Okay. Oh, so much to talk about there, but let's go to Stephanie next.
All right, I'm actually going to share screen. As I try to share my screen, my name is Stephanie Pizzarillos. I am hello. I like the waves. Do you guys see my, whatever you call this, PowerPoint?
Yep. Yeah, I'm gonna see your screen. I want to expand. Yep. Yeah, there you go.
There we go. All right. I am a writer of comics, of prose, graphic novels. I'm a zinester. What else do I do? My professional background is actually public health, and I'm a mom. And I guess I'm starting out with, so what if I actually crowdfunded? So I'm an example of, I've been involved in a bunch of crowdfunding projects, and I've done one solo. But the ones that I've been involved with, some of them I actually backled, either because I was asked to, so my name wasn't on there as being the front person. Or I backled because I saw the organizers weren't as savvy, and I just took the enthusiasm and initiative to help get us do that extra work. So these are comics anthologies, prose anthologies, zines, and some have actually been for benefits. And those are some of the visuals. And actually, Patrick too was involved with, we had a shared one, speculative fiction for dreamers. That's that orange book that he has behind them with the pretty lady. So what for the, this is the what and the why, right, Jana? Is that what I'm answering? The what and the why. So for my solo one, I fundraised actually a zine, Zine 100, How Not to Be Colonized by Outreach Programs, a how-to zine on working with people who offer you stuff. And it's a public healthish zine that I, who am not an illustrator, but that's the fun of zines, illustrated and wrote. But then I partnered with I Love My Hood, a community group here in New York City that beautifies the area with murals. And you know, I joke when I was on New York, a panel on crowdfunding at New York Comic Con and talking about this, like I do the Zorba method, like I decided to do this, you know, within a month or two, and I just did it. And my goal was, I think, I'll say modest, but for $2,000, not modest for a zine. And we were funded at like 2,500, which was fabulous. The nice thing about the zine, besides a copy of that I illustrated and wrote, there was a copy by an actual illustrator. It came with a webinar. But the nice thing about this was that you weren't just funding the zine itself. You were actually funding a buddy copy that would go to a community organization or institution. So even we had 86 backers, but you kind of double that in terms of its reach. So that just shows you, you know, who actually got our buddy copies. Harvard Library has a copy. There's a University of Miami has a copy, some bars, trans health clinics. I mean, really, the reach of the zine was just so exciting to see. So the why, so why do am I answering the why, Jana, or is this just?
Sure, go ahead.
So why do it? I mean, obviously for pre-orders, obviously for buzz, you know this in the publishing world, it's all about those pre-orders and buzz. You know, I am someone that had 2 agents. I know traditional publishing is slow. I was frustrated with my, at the time, agent never getting back to me. I was waiting for artwork from illustrators because art takes a lot of time. So I just wanted something immediate and instant. And that's the beauty for me in crowdfunding, even though, yes, it takes a lot of work, but sometimes you just jump into it, which is what I did. As a woman, as a now stay-at-home mom, I wanted to look out for myself and make sure my resume was alive. A lot of stay-at-home moms find themselves, if suddenly you have to get back in the grind, you have a gap in your resume. And this is a great way to connect my writing career with my public health career, you know, just in case. So it was a feminist move on my part to do that. I mean, the big answer is because I'm nudged. I wasn't even planning on doing this. And a higher up told me, you know, you need to do your own thing. This would be supported, etc. So as most of my stuff in comics in particular, it's because somebody has asked me to. And then obviously if I'm an author in an anthology, I like to lean in. That's not the case for everyone, and I understand why. I know for some of the crowdfunding campaigns, some authors scoffed at actually having to promote their work, particularly if they weren't paid for the piece and were crowdfunding to get a paycheck, but then you spend all the hours advertising. So that's not for everyone, and I respect that, but you know, this is just something, this is New York City sirens you guys are hearing. This is just something that, you know, I had the time and I believed in doing it. And of course, to get a better estimate on printing estimates, you know, that's a big thing. If you all of a sudden have like, let's just make up a $10,000 interest, you know, before you print, it's good to know how many things you need to print. And then obviously, if it's not me spearheading it, it's people are doing it because they actually have to fund the publication because they need those funds to actually go to the printer and sometimes for creator payment. I'll stop sharing. Yeah, that's insider art. That was one of the benefit anthologies that I worked on with Shelley Bond.
Cool.
Super cool.
So I think Lex, how about if you go next?
Sure. So my name is Lex Fajardo, and also a former KCU alum. I was in a group with Patrick and Nate, and it was great. And I have done a number of Kickstarters. First and foremost, I'm a cartoonist. I do a graphic novel series called Kid Beowulf, and I'm going to share my screen too because that is instructive. So let me find. Okay, you guys see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I've published traditionally and then also self-published. I consider myself sort of I started self-publishing, so I've always gone that route to get my work out into the world. My first Kickstarter was back in 2012, and it was for the third book in my series. At the time, I was with a small publisher, and they, in the midst of production of the third book, they closed up shop. And so I just decided to take a crack at Kickstarter, which was relatively new, I think, at the time. And I self-published the black and white version of the third book in my series. And that was successful and very eye-opening and a really good experience. Since then, I've done a couple of others. One was for a mobile game. And then in the between, this was in 2016. And then in the between time, I found a new publisher, republished the books in color, did the first 3 with them, and then continued the series on my own for book 4. This was launched in 2020, I believe. This is for book 4. Instructive here because this one was unsuccessful, and I have a lot to share about that. And I took what I learned from that campaign in October 2020 and relaunched the book again, I think a short year later. Same book, really just retooled it, rethought about it, and restructured the goal, all that stuff, and relaunched in 2021 with book 4. And then I did another small project later that year for a storybook. So Kickstarter has generally been the platform I've used, and it has its ups and downs, and its anxieties, which I'm sure we can talk about as well. This time around, I'm doing a Kickstarter for the next book in my series. And I was originally actually going to launch it on Kickstarter in July when I heard about through KCU, actually, the Crowdfundr opportunity. And I just shifted gears because I just thought it'd be interesting because the Crowdfundr seemed to be harnessing a lot of good contacts like you, Jen, and the crew and the other people, and a concerted effort to really spotlight in July. And even though it's a platform I'm not very familiar with, I thought it'd be worth a shot. And we can get into that as well about what I think the benefits of Crowdfundr are versus Kickstarter. So just a glimpse of my work.
Great. Oh my gosh. Every single one of you I have all these topics to talk about, but let's talk first to Gibson and then we'll go with Nate.
Hi, I'm Gibson Twist. I've forgotten everything that I was going to say. My partner Rory, who is not here, have done together 14 successful crowdfunds. And the first one was in 2013, I want to say. We funded a printing of a webcomic that I was doing at the time, Pictures of You. We funded the first 2 books of that series and went on to, in different other campaigns, fund 6 of them, plus a handful of shorter comics and a poster that you can actually see behind me somewhere, and a coloring book. I think the thing that I've learned after running so many of them is that they are not actually as scary as they seem, and there is a lot of room for error. It's pretty forgiving. the biggest thing is just to plan out how you're going to get people's eyes on your campaign. That is the most important thing of all of them. Should I say more? Is there more?
I think that's a good intro. Yeah, that's good. We're gonna dive into all of these things that you guys have brought up. Okay, Nate.
Right on.
I'm Nate Lovett, primarily an illustrator who's becoming an author illustrator, I guess. I've done one Kickstarter, basically after seeing my KCU group, as Patrick and Lexa mentioned, we all kind of clicked, and we'd all, 4 of the 5 of us have done, well, now have done Kickstarters. And so I took a project that was just kind of an idea and decided to work with it and give it a shot on Kickstarter to try it out. I backed over 100 some and just never, and been a part of others, but never ran one myself. So actually I'll share my screen because I've got my, let's see. Yeah, so this was my Kickstarter for Punk Rock Ninja. I started off with just a small budget myself, goal of 18. I managed to make over 4, almost 4.5. Yeah. And having seen so many people do them, I think I learned a lot from them to make it easier for me when I actually did it. So some of the scariness was there, but I think it went really well. And I almost feel like mine was too easy, because I funded second day, Project We Love first day. I don't know if it was beginner's luck or what, but other than the lull in the middle, which everybody tends to experience, I didn't really have many bumps. So yeah, I don't know what else.
That's great though. Wow. Another, you way surpassed your initial goal. That congratulations. Oh my gosh. Are you planning to do another one?
I was hoping to do one with the Crowdfundr, do one of my other projects, but my work schedule just hasn't allowed it. I like to, with Punk Rock Ninja, I had the project, it was already penciled, inked. All I had to do was color it and letter it. And by the time the campaign was done, it was colored. So I like to have the book almost done before I launch it, because I hate waiting a year or more sometimes, like some projects have had. So I haven't been able to get the project I want to do to that point. It's getting close, but not enough that I'm prepared to do it. So hopefully this fall, I'll finally be launching another one.
Cool. Okay, so there were 2 topics that kind of came up as each of you was doing your introduction. One was something you said, Gibson, which is you need to plan how you're going to get eyes on your campaign. So basically publicity, promotion, marketing, all that stuff, like figuring out how you're going to get exposure. So that is one big topic that I'd like to talk about with all of you. And then the other one is production. I saw Roger ask a question about printing. So I want to dive into that as well. But let's start with the getting eyeballs on your work. So with each of you, I'd like to know, did you just kind of walk me through how you thought about that? Was it something where you did tons of planning in advance? Did you line a lot of stuff up? Was it something that really scared you? Was it something that you did on the fly? So however you each tackled that issue. So I don't know whether we should go in order again, or just whichever one of you wants to say something first. Well, let's go in order.
Like, we're gonna be too.
Stephanie, you can go start off.
All right, I didn't say it to do that, but all right. So yeah, exposure. I mean, I definitely have a public health network, right? So I was using and thinking about who in my public health life, particularly since I was basing it, a lot of lessons learned and a lot of people still in it and very frustrated with it. So I had those folks, right? You know, building an email list. I have a modest email list, and we could talk about, hey, one of the benefits of why you do this is to make a bigger email list. So, and then so much of it too, you know, I might be misterming it. Malcolm Gladwell has this term of, I think it's connectors. I really believe in that. That you figure out, or you know, or maybe you're one yourself, you might not have like such a large fan base, and that's certainly in my case. But if you figure out a few people that do, they'll share that. And I can say for probably a lot of how this got backed was because of those few connectors that did share it on their much larger platforms. Certainly it being chosen as a project we love right at the start and being featured on Kickstarter's main page and newsletter. I mean, I don't know most of these people who backed my project. So that's where I always come in as this sort of like antimatter particle on a panel that says you got to have a huge list. You have to. Yes, that's great. But, you know, that shouldn't prevent you. You might put a lower goal. Yeah, so that's kind of how, and then word of mouth. I mean, for me, for that, a lot of people, particularly my elderly fans, for some of my elderly neighbors, or people who come to my readings, they don't do online stuff, but they give me wads of money and say, can I buy this, right? So people that I know out there, you know, I would go in their face, you know, oh, you're an ICU doctor, you don't do Kickstarter. Okay, well, I'm happy to take your money right now, and we'll make you an email account, and like, you know, and that's probably what I'm going to do. I'm going to make this big email account and collect funds. And at the end of the campaign, bam, there's that huge amount for all the people that I would have to do. And then book your self-fund shows. But I think I've said enough.
Oh, well, let me just ask you one thing. How did you end up getting chosen by the Kickstarter to be a project that was featured on
Kickstarter gods? Like, they review it, and you just wake up and you have it. And sometimes you get it before you're even live.
Mhm.
Yeah, sometimes that's just, I mean, I will say for that particular, the one that I did totally solo, this was definitely a unique project. Not many zines on there, and it had a public health benefit. There was a community benefit to it.
Mhm.
And then how I printed it, and I'll save that for when you ask that question, is also kind of different too. So when we get to that.
Okay. All right.
I was just going to say the project we love badge of status honor is, to my mind, a mystifying thing. I mean, Patrick might and Gibson might have better ideas about it, because I think you can talk directly to some of those people behind Kickstarter who might make those decisions. I did not, but I think a lot of it maybe has to do with how quickly you fund a certain percentage of your goal, and it sort of kicks it up to the main page. It is helpful, and I think there are strategies to try and goose that. So I don't know.
Well, since you're talking, Lex, do you want to talk about your own personal strategy for getting eyes on your campaigns?
Oh, geez. That I still really struggle with. It's primarily through, I would say, previous campaigns. So as I said, I've done 4 so far. All of those people have been added to my ongoing email list and newsletter, and each of them, for the most part, has come back to back subsequent campaigns. So that's huge. I don't grow my audience as much as I would like to through Kickstarter, which is frustrating, and I don't know why that is. I think it's because personally my work sort of lives in this hybrid space of like, people are used to seeing it in the bookstores, and then I'm doing the self-publishing thing. So that could be just a challenge of the narrative. Like, I just don't know quite how to, like, what audience I'm talking to help fund this thing. So that's something I've always sort of struggled with. What else? So I would say and I've tried social media, but I don't really have a huge base there. I think Stephanie's point of having those connectors is probably huge, and I should lean into that a little bit more. So I'm going to take that advice. And now, and these days, actually, the sort of the how social media is ebbing away. I mean, I think it was always a fiction to begin with, but now it's really become apparent. I'm really curious in this, campaign in July, how much to lean on that, if to lean on that at all. So I'm actually here to get strategies from other gurus as well. And but in terms of getting that crowd, a lot of it is just from doing previous campaigns that were successful, delivering on those campaigns, as Nate said, like having the work done, and sort of just proving the quality that the next book in the series will be what they want. So.
Got it. All right. Who wants to take the floor next?
We were fortunate enough that we brought an existing audience when we did our crowdfunds. Like I had a webcomic audience, and Rory had also a webcomic audience, and she had a little bit of there's a fair amount of coverage in international press for her 100 Days, 100 Women series, where she drew portraits of lesser known or under known women in history, and she did a poster for that, which turned out to be our best-selling crowdfund. I don't remember exactly what the initial funding goal was, but we ended up pulling in about 16,000. And that was because she was getting promotion and being featured in like Upworthy, I think was the big one that featured her, and she was in Chatelaine magazine talking about it, and she got kind of viral exposure that way. So I guess the takeaway is go viral. But I think the biggest part of our success was that we were able to build that audience beforehand by largely just posting things online for free, which not everybody can do that, of course, but it really helped us. So I think if you are doing a comic and you are going to self-publish it, I actually think the best thing you can do beforehand is to put it online, make a webcomic out of it, build whatever audience you can that way, and some of those people will come by and say, "Hey, I like that, I want that," and they'll give you some money for it, which also helps. If you want to build a Patreon, it's very similar.
Gibson, could you say a little bit about the viral exposure that Rory got? Did Rory or you do any outreach to any publications to talk about the project, or did they just find it on your social media, or how did they hear about it?
I believe it was just that people started talking about it. People started sharing on social media and other ways the pictures that she was posting on her social media, and bigger and bigger accounts would notice it and share it, and then popular websites started noticing and asking her. She also got attention from Stephanie. Did you mention that you worked with Shelley Bond? Because Shelley,
I was part of her Insider Art project, and
right.
Started working on a few things after that.
Right. Rory and I actually worked with Shelley also, and Shelley noticed Rory through her viral sensation. She also got featured in a project we love on whatever site we were filming it on. I don't remember. And that was the only one where we were, I think, the only one where we were featured, and it made a lot of difference there too. But it is hard to do. We've done 14, and one of them got featured, so it's actually pretty special if you get featured on one of those. Not a guarantee of success, but it's pretty good. It's a huge boost.
Okay, Patrick or Nate, which one of you wants to be second to last?
I'll go ahead and go. I use the connectors. I've got an okay following in social media, except I'm horrible at it and I'm not very active. But I've got friends who have decent followings who were able to share it, and then those shares got shared, and managed to set up a couple interviews with some podcasts and whatnot for it. But the connectors was and getting the project we love early were huge benefits in getting my project out there.
Mhm. Great. All right, Patrick.
Okay, so I want to cover a few things if you don't mind, Jana. Starting with what Nate, you mentioned earlier regarding how lucky you got, right? The whole concept of beginner's luck, because that was something that I really wanted to zoom in on for my second campaign, right? I wanted to use my second campaign to stress test my ideas and really like eliminate beginner's luck. And so that said, I've done some research on like crowdfunding trends since about 2020. And you were like right at the tippy top of crowdfunding, like generosity in general when you did your campaign. So I don't have numbers and I don't have any graphs, but I would bet that if we were to look at the campaigns that happened around your window, and there was probably a huge number of them that were successful. So, I mean, that's just like an interest. And then there's been a bit of a significant downturn in the past year too. And that is most evident in anthologies are having the hardest time in terms of getting funded. And that comes to my other point, to something Lex said, right, is that the other thing that's really having a hard time getting funded is kids content, right? So like with the recent downturn of things, not safe for work content is going up and kids content is going down, you know, whatever that means. So those are some things that kind of came to mind from hearing you folks, but I wanted to just mention quickly about like how I got eyeballs, right? Because so much of it was about my own career trajectory. At least for my campaign, my career trajectory was significant in that, you know, working artist with a day job allowed me to do a lot of experimental art, gallery installations, interactive projects. And so that's how I was able to build a bit of an audience, but it was really spread out everywhere: Facebook, social medias, locals, that sort of thing. So once the day job was gone, there was a period of just complete randomness in terms of picking up gigs, freelance gigs, like, you know, favor gigs. Like, I know you're out of a job, I'll hire you to do this thing, you know, design the tattoo for me or whatever. The fun stuff was the tea labels. But thanks to KCU, right, a lot of that got focused and became more and more focused towards a newsletter and then towards the project, my project, right? And that was the one thing, like crowdfunding becomes like a thing that's like, it becomes a solution to randomness, right? Because now all of a sudden, it's not just, these are the things I do, I like poetry, I like nature walks, tea, whatever. But now I could all kind of streamline it into, this is the thing I'm crowdfunding, and it has all of these components behind it. And so I think that's a major factor in kind of taking your newsletter and really being able to test who's going to respond, right? The people, you get to see the stats, how many people open your newsletter, how many people click on whatever it is on that newsletter. So that kind of helps give a sense of what it is you're putting out there that your readers respond to. And then so that it's like, that's part of the, I guess, the game is to like get all to really try and broaden the appeal of whatever that project is, but then also like make it all seem like it's planned out, right? So to that end, I'm curious if the PWL, the Project We Love, sticker is connected to their sense that you're going to introduce a new audience to their platform, right? So I kind of got that sense with my first campaign, because I was doing this whole thing. Hey, former art director of Kung Fu magazine, I've got this whole like martial arts community that wants to help me, you know, recover from the whole COVID impact on my career. And then with my second campaign, I was doing I put at the very front my mission to acquire new backers, right? My whole narrative wasn't, I want to make X amount of dollars. My whole narrative was, I want to make X number of backers. I want to add X number of backers to my campaign. And then to that end, I kind of structured my campaign towards elevating other people's voices, right? I was doing like an interview series, and I was, once again, the martial arts theme, right? I was doing this whole thing, Ask the Kung Fu Master. I had one of my buddies who was also doing their first Kickstarter campaign, who also happens to be like an accomplished martial arts master, you know, join me on my live streams. And we presented that to Kickstarter as, we're not going to ask money for us. We're going to ask people to check out these cool people we plan to interview. And I think that cinched a Project We Love for my campaign and for his campaign, which was his first ever campaign. And it started with the PWL. I think it was because we opened it up with that sense of, we're here to elevate other people's voices. And finally, that brings me back to what Stephanie mentioned about connectors and the value of connectors. And that I want to kind of contrast it with another term I've been kind of cultivating for myself, right? I've been using it in my crowdfunding crucible, which is the concept of a proponent. Someone who's going to take on the quest with you, if not for you. And, you know, probably the same thing as a connector, except that maybe the proponent doesn't have as much pull as you do, but they have that passion or that enthusiasm, or they have that one thing, you know, that just adds to your campaign. Like I can count, you know, Stephanie as a proponent for my first campaign, you know, Lex as well, just in terms of the amount of time he set aside to really refine some of like the nuts and bolts of what the campaign looked like. So they're there, and then it's just like, it's a very reciprocal process. So I definitely want to like put that concept in people's heads, like not just the quest for a proponent, but to look for the opportunity to be a proponent for someone else's campaigns.
You know, Patrick, one thing I was thinking as you were saying this is I was thinking what you said, Nate, that you had backed 100 campaigns, I think you said. I'm
at like 150 some right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's huge. You've helped so many people. So I would be really surprised if that wasn't a factor in helping you get success as well once you were ready.
It's definitely something I hadn't considered. But yeah.
You hadn't considered?
I hadn't even thought of that.
Wow,
Yeah. I just thought of it more in terms of, okay, I've backed this many, let's finally do one myself. That's really all I had thought about with it.
I think you should definitely consider that as maybe a possibility, either from the Kickstarter side of noticing who the term super backers are, and then certainly the chatter on social media is, if I don't see that person is backed XYZ, I don't back their project. Like, so I'm sure that factored in on top of your own brilliance and magic.
Yeah, I think there is a level of social proof and community that is inherent in Kickstarter, which is helps the circle of funding, which is what I'm curious about with Crowdfundr, because it doesn't, as you said at the top, Jenna, it's newish. I don't think it's built up that level of social proof, and it also, because you can tailor it to look like your site, it doesn't necessarily, I think if you're coming to a crowdfunder, you might not necessarily know you're on Crowdfundr. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. These are things I've just sort of discovered as I'm developing my own campaign from this new platform. So that'll be interesting to see. But the The only thing I would add, I think the difference between the two is Crowdfundr gives you more options in terms of the take it or leave it scenario, which is sort of how Kickstarter functions. And I think how a lot of campaigns, well, they live and die on that model. So so anyway, just a couple observations.
I want to make sure that we have time for people here who are in the audience, so to speak, to be able to ask questions. I did say I wanted to ask each of you about the production side of things, but once we've gone through this topic, then I'm going to open up the floor for all of you guys if you want to ask questions yourselves. So once again, going through with each of you, what were the factor, like could you talk about how far along your projects were at the point when you decided to crowdfund each of them? And like, did you have a print run that you did? Did you do print on demand? Was it like, have you done books? Have you done merchandise? Just say whatever you feel would be useful about the actual nuts and bolts of creating the work. So who would like to take the lead on this?
I'll go first since it's quick. So, and this is one of my own peccadillos about crowdfunding is don't crowdfund until your book is done. Just like the project should, I think, really be 90% there. And that's my own thing. I have actually, I won't name names, but I have a friend who kickstarted something 20 years ago, and I haven't gotten the book yet, but he's getting there. So for instance, the new book I'm doing is completely done. This is one of the proofs that I've done for the book I'm going to crowdfund. And this is sort of speaks to something that's sort of happening in the chat, which I think is related to your goal. And because I think how you determine how you're going to produce your book is the key factor to how much you want to request. So I've done traditional publishing with a printer, and you sort of order your 500 to 1,000 books or however much you want, fulfill those for the Kickstarter, and then they sort of live in your garage, and then you hand sell them or distribute them forevermore. That was sort of the model that I'd done for a long time, and that was the model I intended to do for book 4 that I tried to crowdfund in, I think, 2020. And my goal for that was pretty high. I think I was asking for 10 grand on that, and that was just to get me, like, I think 250 full color 6x9 200-page graphic novel books. That one didn't fund, and I think because of that, when I went back to the drawing board, I just shifted the model entirely for me to print on demand, which it has varying degrees of quality. I found some good outlets that worked for me that got me to the book looking the way I wanted it to. And so because I shifted to POD, that opened up, I think, some of the opportunities for the amount I would need to fund, which was much lower. And then I could just sort of focus on that and just really just try to get the book out, which was at that point to become my main goal, as opposed to just the anxiety of needing, 15K to print a book. It's just, sometimes it's just not tenable. So my whole model has shifted because of that. And that's sort of where I'm at now when I do my new goals. I sort of view it as artisanal publishing. So so that would be my point of view.
Would you be willing to say which print on demand
Sure.
outlet you do use?
So for this one, I've done a couple of different quotes and production. This one is from Ingram Spark, and I like them because the quality is pretty good on the interior. It's not as sharp as you would get from like some other printing that traditional print offset printing is just going to look better. That's just the way it is. But the benefits of Ingram Spark are you can do a large print run, a small print run. It also gives you distribution. You can get into all those online stores, Books A Million, Target, whenever it populates in those spaces, Amazon as well. And so it sort of feeds that channel for me. And then I do a lot of hand selling on my own at book fairs and conventions, and sort of fulfill those immediate backers through through the crowdfund that way. I've also had success doing hardcover editions through Barnes and Noble Press, which actually does some really good high quality stuff. They're print on demand. You can do sort of the regular printing and then sort of high quality printing. So, and I think they are, you know, if you look at the books, my books versus others that are on the shelf in the market, they would look akin. You know, I don't think the quality is that big. And what's also interesting is my readers haven't mentioned anything. They're just happy to get the book, and they say it looks great. And so my own, I remember when I first started publishing, it's like, and talking to my publisher, oh, it's got to be on glossy paper, and I want the spot gloss and all this stuff, all these, like, you know, bells and whistles, which is great when they're paying for it. But, you know, and I just had to shift because the marketplace has shifted. And so I want my book to still be available. And with that come these different considerations. So.
Great. Okay. Who'd like to jump in next?
I'll jump in. I would agree with Lex about having the material finished, at least mostly finished, before you start, because it can get crazy if you don't. But there are people who will crowdfund for something that they haven't done yet, and generally those are higher amounts because they're going to, you know, pay for themselves to live and pay bills during the time that they're creating it. But it is something that you probably would want a sizable existing audience, because you need people to trust you to say, yeah, you're not going to get this for a year and a half. Give me $25. You're not going to get it for a while. There needs to be some level of trust there. But it is possible. All of mine were finished before I did anything. But we did come up with a crowdfunding plan for something that we hadn't done when we were thinking we were, you know, going to be self-publishing more and more, like kids' books especially, which was delivering like a digital version of all of the pages that we finished in a particular month, every month, or every 6 weeks, or however long it took. We were going to deliver it digitally in chapters to all of our backers until we were finished, and then we would, you know, send out a printed version of it. But we never got to it because we met Jana and you know, got a publishing deal and all of that. So
Stephanie, do you want to say something about, I'd love to hear about your zine, because your zine is so much like on the opposite end of the spectrum from like a hardcover printed book. How did you print it? Did you like Xerox it or?
Oh yeah. I had a whole thing written up for Roger in the chat, and then you said, oh, we're going to hit it. So yeah, so that project's quite unique in that, yeah, I hand wrote and drew the zine. And then I chose the local stationery store that serves primarily elderly, poor, do not have access to internet, and SROs, single residency occupancies, neighborhood that in my neighborhood, because I feel they have a community benefit. And I used them and their Xerox machine for my 100. So it was a Make 100 project. I was only committed to folding 100 of these things in the playground as I watched my kids and cutting and hand coloring. So that was my zine. But for the one where I used an illustrator, and all of this, by the way, is part of my pitch and my narrative, right? I used a local Brooklyn printer, union owned and operated, Radix Media. That's part of my narrative. I wanted to support this radical printer, and then we just go to Brooklyn and pick it up. And then, you know, things like stickers is whatever Stickerfy or whatever company to get those things. So, and then on my packaging side, I went with, I forgot their name, No Issue or something like that, something higher end. I'm all about packaging. I love packaging. I think I'm making you a gift. I handwrite everything. I say this until, you know, I get thousands of orders, right, guys? But until then, you know, but I include that all in part of my narrative. Now, for my upcoming Kickstarter, which is totally different and more traditional publishing, you know, I'm going to be using Andy Schmidt's Onyx Printing. I think it's called Onyx, something like that. Patrick can correct me. And he handles they do, you know, Penguin Random House. They do a lot of the comic books. They do everything, but he can get you, from what he's told us, you know, smaller prices because he has those connections. Because my publishing in print on the vision of my husband, he's into fine press. I'm POD. Because it's just aesthetically, when I buy a book, it's not what I want. I back tons of projects with it, but for our publishing imprint, it's not something that I could do. So yeah, that's a totally different campaign. And then for other things, because we also deal with fine press, getting prints done by a specialized printer, you know, limited edition on special paper and blah, blah, blah. So very different than my zine.
What was the name of the Onyx?
I think it's, I'll look it up as we talk.
ONS, I think, just ONS printers.
I don't know. I'm gonna look it up.
Okay.
But it's part of, you know, Andy Schmidt, editor, writer. He does Comics Connection, and now, like, Comics Connection and Comics Experience and all that sort of stuff. The other reason why I would use them is because it's personalized services. So you actually speak to his wife, himself, and yeah, it's human beings. And he seems like a really nice guy.
Okay.
Also behind CEX Publishing.
Oh, thanks.
Correct.
So let's see, who would like to talk next a little bit? I think Nate and Patrick, you haven't talked yet about your production.
Well, Nate, go right ahead.
Okay. Like the others have said, having the book almost complete is huge for me. And I think is a big part of, like I said, getting it done and out. I just funded, mine was just for a floppy comic. I had set my goal for, so I could print 200 copies to have for whatever. And if I needed to pull the backers from those, so be it. I ended up getting the 200, and then I printed 100 of the Kickstarter exclusive because I made enough. It ended up having the perfect binding. It had some bonus pages of sketches and production material inside of it, different cover. But having everything started, almost done beforehand, made everything easier. I ended up doing some stickers and a print thing, basically. Kept it simple rather than trying to do anything overly complicated, especially since it was my first one. So
What vendors did you use for the printing?
I used Mix'em.
Okay. For everything, or did you use something
for the comics. The stickers, I'm trying to remember who I used. I don't remember which sticker company. I looked at a few. I'd have to dig to find out who it was exactly. And prints, I have a friend who does all prints for me over here, so I was able to get them dirt cheap through them and whatnot. So
Stephanie?
Oh no, only if, was it Nate speaking? Only if you're done, Nate.
yeah, I'm done.
So actually it's onsprinting.com is the printer, onsprinting.com is the printer that I will use going forward for my next project with Andy Schmidt. And I wanted to say, and again, I'm a kind of an outlier. You know, I personally, when I back projects, don't care about actually receiving the product. That doesn't mean any of you shouldn't send me what I paid for, disclaimer. But me personally, I'm backing the creator. I don't mind if I don't get a comic for 2 years. Probably should follow everyone else's advice, though, that you should have something mostly done. Particularly if you do ship, like, for example, You know, the wait time for, I was told for ONS printing, which prints in actually Korea, because of COVID, because of the weird world we live in, you should plan between 2 and 5 months, which is kind of mind-boggling when I'm used to just going to Brooklyn or upstate New York for my smaller projects. So yeah, I mean, people back projects for different reasons, but I'm sure that waiting 2 years and not minding is an outlier for most folks. And I back projects I don't even want, but I want to just back to creator, and I'm happy to gift it to someone.
Thanks for that perspective, Patrick.
So I agree that getting your project as done as you humanly can is extremely important, right? It's a measure of your ability to perform. And yet I don't follow my own advice. You know, I did have my book. What I had remaining from my first campaign was the coloring, right? And so I put that as a part of my campaign narrative, that I'm going to do the coloring. And I kind of did some live streams. I did some like videos that I would share as updates to my backers, so that, you know, once again, so much of it was about that intimate connection you have with your backers, right? And so for me, like, it was so much about keeping that connection going. With my second campaign, even though I didn't want to, I kind of got swept up. I am paying the price for certain successes, right? And so as a part of the whole campaign, I started off as a 100-page graphic novel, which was already 10 more pages than my previous volume. But some of my stretch goals was to add pages to the book, right? Resulting in 120 some odd page book. Now, didn't really factor into my plan. That would mean more pages to color, more pages to lay out. And so my plans to have like certain benchmark meant, you know, I had to completely rethink my own production for volume 2 in the wake of these successes, which is painful, and it's painful to admit, but you know, you've got to. So I've definitely had to reshuffle some of my own production list, so that I can get certain things done specifically to let my backers know that one of our big stretch goals was a fold out map. That meant I had to illustrate the fold out map. So, you know, let me put that to the front of the list so that people can see that the stretch goal, you know, is being met. Here's the map, you know, which is going to be sent to print at a local printer, because, you know, that printer, you know, does quality that I like, and will deliver it right to my front door because we're kind of neighbors. But the book itself, once it's finished, I'll send to Comic Impressions, which is a US digital printer. So I can, you know, I can work around like international shipping issues and just, you know, get it printed in the US. It's going to be a relatively small run, you know, no more than 200 copies, maybe. And then if I need to have it shipped, expedited, I can, to kind of make up for some of my own production delays.
I just want to add a little bit to the having everything more or less done and ready to go before you crowdfund. Is, I don't know if Crowdfundr does this. I would imagine they do. Kickstarter and Indiegogo both require a delivery date, which isn't in stone, but it's, you know, a date. And if it's too far in the future, that might be a little off-putting to people who are maybe on the fence about backing it. So if, you know, if you're running the campaign in April and your delivery date is in June, that's a pretty quick turnaround. People are gonna, you know, feel a little more confident than, oh, you're gonna have to wait 8 or 9 months to get this. So that's something to think about.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I think we can start moving to questions. Ben, I see that you have your hand raised, but I did see that Marie had a question in the chat a while back, and I just want to make sure. Marie, did you get your question answered in the chat, or do you want to ask it right now?
It was pretty much answered. I was asking about the effectiveness of live events, like doing a book reading or some kind of a event for kids or something to try to raise awareness. If you do that, is it more or less as likely to convert people to actually buy your thing as doing a social media outreach post thing?
It depends. It's different for different people. You know, everybody's got a little different way of coming at it. Different things work for different audiences. You know, like we always had a little trouble kind of conjuring how we were going to reach people for Kidlit. And other people have different ideas than we ever had, and different things are going to work for different people. I think it's great to just try things.
Mm-hmm.
If something doesn't work, move on to the next one. Don't worry about it. Just keep going until you find the thing that works for you.
Thanks.
Yeah, when I ran mine, Free Comic Book Day happened to hit during it, and I was set up at a shop, so I had a little poster with a QR code that took you directly to it, and managed to get a few from it. But it, you know, that's at a comic shop where people are looking for comics. At a library, it might not hit as much. Yeah, it just varies, I think.
Okay, thanks.
The one thing I would say is that the value in the in-person events would also be in documenting those in-person events so that it's also content for like a social media post or for a newsletter update or something, right? So there's the goal of getting backers to, potential people to back your campaign in person at the event. But then there's also the goal of getting some good shots, some good selfies, or some, somebody else to film you signing something. And then that becomes the thing that you share on your socials or in your newsletter.
Okay, thanks.
All right, Ben.
Yeah, hi. I had a comment and a tip actually related to what Stephanie was talking about earlier about backing projects that you might not ever read, but just to back the backer. So done two campaigns and I befriended a power backer on Kickstarter. He's done a couple dozen successful Kickstarters and he's backed almost 1,000. And he actually will build into his Kickstarter budget a small slice specifically for backing other projects. So if his funding goal is $5,000, he'll budget in $300 just to spread the money around to other Kickstarter projects. And that's how he slowly but surely builds up his community of other creators. They say, hey, he backed me, I'll back him, all that stuff. And looks like it's really effective. I mean, he's had a couple dozen successful Kickstarters. So I thought that was a great tip. I haven't tried it myself, but I will try it on my next one.
That's super interesting.
Always have sincerity as your foundation, right? Work, whatever magic in this universe, meaning you might not get that in return, but it could be a perk, right? Like it's great that to share the love. I mean, that's definitely, Ben, you hit on exactly part of why I do it. I can't write it off as in my taxes. I joke with my accountant that like so much of my quote unquote charity is supporting artists that I can't write off. But if your heart is there, and certainly if it shows, you get labeled as a super backer on Kickstarter. It's this huge label that's part of your identity. Then you also then start getting DMs from everyone that's pays to see who's a super backer. But yeah, that's a great share that you gave, Ben. Thank you.
Yeah, I've heard that being a super backer also is part of the algorithm that helps bubble your new projects, your latest projects up further within the Kickstarter community. So like, it's kind of like hits a critical mass at some point. If you've backed so many and done so many successful projects, it's like every one you do after that, you have a head start.
Oh, I didn't know that. Thank you for that.
That's what I've heard. Yeah, I haven't seen anything like written in stone.
It's the
but
Kickstarter gods.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation, Ben. The other thing I would mention, is if you're a creator or even someone thinking of backing, don't sleep on digital. Like, make your book available as a digital reward. It's a low price point. We don't have a lot of shelf space in our lives, but there are a lot of people who I want to back. So I will often go for that PDF, and it raises the numbers of backers, and it's an easy reward to offer and to get. So something to consider.
I would agree so much that I would say if you are not offering a digital component, you are making a mistake. There are a ton of people out there who don't want to give you $25. They don't have $25. They've got $1. If you've got a digital thing that you can just, drop $1 on, you'd be surprised how quickly that adds up.
The
Especially
digital has the highest margin too.
I was just gonna add, especially with international shipping costs. I know for some of the illustrators I work with, like even sending them a comp copy, they get charged for them getting mail. So they're like, yeah, if you have a digital, I'll take that one. I mean, I'm a print woman, but I will cave in to this advice for you should offer digital.
Mhm. Are there any other questions people here you guys want to ask this amazing panel of people who've done crowdfunding already to figure out if you might want to do it? I know there's been a lot of questions in the chat, and I feel like everybody's been answering, but if you've asked something in the chat and you want to sort of get an expanded answer, raise your hand. Yes, Christine.
Hi. Okay, so we were talking about the delivery and, going digital as well as international. Because I know right now I have an Etsy store and shipping international is a nightmare cost-wise. So how do you guys handle that with, you have a lot of crowdfunding from other countries, Australia or anywhere, or is it better, it's good to offer the digital as well, but how much of that how much of that is your cost? And
I've had a fair amount of international backers, and I mean the shipping is crazy expensive, but the best thing you can do is just kind of say, well, if you want to pay for it, you can get it, and just charge the amount that it's going to cost, and let people make their own choices as to whether they're going to pay that much. Because for some people, it's going to be worth it. They really want that thing and they're willing to support you. And they'll pay, $25 extra just to ship it.
okay, yeah, that's good to know. And what's your percentage? What do you think of what you're raising goes to production and the printing of the book? Actually, I mean,
most of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, over the shipping costs, most of it is to production, to printing.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
You do also want to factor in the slice that Kickstarter, Crowdfundr, Indiegogo will take. So that's generally, what is that, like 3 to 5%, guys? Is somewhere in that, or is it higher?
10. It's like 10 for Kickstarter.
Is it?
It's like 5 for Kickstarter and like taxes and stuff. So
with the site takes its cut, and then there's also credit card processing fees. So yeah, it's I think Crowdfundr is 5%. Kickstarter has been as much as I think 7% or maybe more. I forget what Indiegogo was, but yeah, it usually comes between 8 and 10%. You're going to want to factor in for those processing costs.
Yeah, it can be a rude awakening when your goal is something that is just for your production. You hit that goal, but then the money you actually get in your bank account is a third of that because of these other fees that are factoring in. So always work in that buffer.
And even just add 10 or 15% onto your total for incidental costs that you are not anticipating beforehand. I know for our first one, we were just absolutely floored at how much shipping costs actually were, because we didn't do the appropriate amount of research beforehand. And when you're doing this for the first time and you don't know all the things that you need to know, yeah, factor in just a little bit extra to cover whatever is going to pop up.
Right. Thanks, guys.
I think there's a key in like considering it an investment, right? So even if you make your goal, like, I think that's why I try and do everything possible to make my goal so easily achieved that there's room to go past it, right? And then this way I know that once the goal has been met, that's just this basic thing. And now I'm really about trying to recoup the investment I plan to make by spending extra. And then if you know, I don't have the exact math, but like you can kind of maybe set up, depending on how many backers you have and where they're from, right? Maybe the local shipping can also offset some of the international shipping, but still, you know, be willing to make that ask, right? If they're backing internationally, they're kind of used to getting, you know, paying those taxes and paying that extra sum. And last I checked, you know, the euro might still be stronger than the dollar. So there's that.
I think you can also throw in just like little extra things for international backers to say, hey, thanks for spending a lot of money to get this. Like stickers were mentioned, bookmarks, little pictures of zine if you have it lying around, little bonus zine. Those are always fun, and just throw them in there because you know you're paying $20+ to ship it regardless. It's not gonna increase that price unless you're putting too much in.
Yeah, and key detail, figure out like if you're going to do your own fulfillment, figure out like a kind of a shipping template, right? Like how much weigh out and know how much like your basic reward is going to be, and then know how much your maximum no hold bars package is going to be, so that you are at least working with some familiar bounds and you know how much extra you can fit in before you tip that package over to the next size.
Stephanie?
So I don't know when we're getting kicked off. So we're talking about all of these very good technical details, but I wanted to make sure I said this one thing. For those that haven't done this before, I think it's worth, this is such a noisy street block. There's also the emotional aspect of your campaign. And I think it's normal, and people can chime in. You will also learn in this process who are maybe verbal cheerleaders in your life and who are material supporters. And how are you going to process that information? And that's a tricky thing because we don't like to think about our human interactions based on capitalism and commodity and what do I give, what do you give me, and all that sort of things. But we are humans with emotions. And I think if we do invest time in other people's stuff, we might have a subconscious thinking of, well, the good thing would be if they're in a place in their life that they might do the same, and that might not always happen. So if you do get those lows and those yucky feelings, you're probably also likely to be so surprised by the other support, the strangers, the other things that then maybe gives you faith in humankind. So I just felt it was important to add that in as we're talking about the technicalities and stuff that even I still don't understand about shipping and all of those things that I kind of just figure out, be prepared to feel things. And then maybe change course, maybe, in, your interactions with folks if you feel that's appropriate.
Yeah, Stephanie raised such an important point. Oh my gosh. Like the emotional roller coaster that you will go through your month of kickstarting is there are highs, there are lows. There's the dead period that Nate talked about that goes on interminably. And then if you fund and then that's a whole other discussion that needs to take place, but such a huge important part. And don't get tied up between what you make and what your work is worth. Those are two entirely different things. And it's an easy trap to get sucked into.
Yeah, Lex raises a good point of the dead period that every crowdfund ever done has gone through. most of your backers will come in the first week and the last week. The middle is you're going to have 0 days. Everybody has 0 days. It doesn't mean you're dead. It's not time to panic if you don't get, you know, the backers on a particular day or even in a particular week. And also, you know, let failure be an option, especially if it's your first one. It may be even a good idea to start small. Just do something little, do a zine or a mini comic or whatever, just something easy that you can just do for fun and learn that way. If you fail, if you succeed, you're going to learn things for, you know, when you maybe have a bigger project, and you'll get a better sense of what's good, what's not good, what helps, what doesn't help, what your people are going to want to see in a crowdfund campaign. And don't go overboard on the perks and the rewards. Have some, but don't go crazy with it. Don't have, like, you know, 30 tiers of, you know, pictures and merchandise and t-shirts and you know, Zoom calls and things like that. You know, don't overwhelm people with choices.
Lex, do you think you would be willing to say a few words about what you learned from your failed Kickstarter? I saw what you wrote in the chat.
Sure. Boy, yeah, where to begin? I think, well, first there's the whole funding, like financial component of how I was approaching my book, because in that failed Kickstarter, it was to do a traditional through a printer print run, which is why I needed a very large goal. And you know, as the campaign began, I realized that very shortly that I wasn't going to hit that goal. So then it becomes sort of a month of like sort of grasping at other ways to get the word out. So leaning into the social media aspect of it, or trying to get interviews, or you know, it just sort of, you're sort of, at least for me, I was sort of scrambling in that month because I just wasn't communicating properly with what my book was, who the audience was for. And so when I took what I'd learned from that, I retooled it and threw it into the next campaign. And even in little things like the hero image that I was using, I just totally changed it because and tried to make it more accessible as just a flat out book. It's not a part of a series, even though it works on its own. Trying to really tailor the production component of it, which I think we sort of talked about in the chat. My model has shifted from the traditional publishing to a POD because for who I am as a creator, that's what's working at the moment. But more so just like just all those things you learn about that we talk about in your course, Jana, that how to communicate with your readers, who your book is for, what you want to get out of it as a creator. All those things sort of were wrapped up in that campaign. So it's what I learned, I've tried to apply to the other campaigns I've done. Gibson's point about not offering a lot of rewards, keeping it simple, keeping it just tunnel vision of what your goal is and how you can produce it. And also just being happy with the work. That's another big thing. And Kickstarter or crowdfunding is it's a great thing, and it's also an awful thing, because I think, to Stephanie's point, you just sort of get wrapped up in the emotional ups and downs of it. And so it's good to be strong like Patrick and have those steady connectors, and this is the other thing I would say about Patrick's campaigns I've been impressed about. He's using other things from his life, the kung fu, the tea, the graffiti, the other, and he's bringing that into his campaign. So, which just sort of benefits that book. Like it's a very specific kind of book, but all the things that we create come from other aspects of our lives. So bring those in and try to spin those out to widen your backer range.
Mm-hmm. You know, and as you were talking, Lex, I was thinking that you said that I can't remember the exact words you used, but crowdfunding being difficult in certain ways. And in a way, I think publishing in general is any type of art form where you are putting out your heart basically through your work. Because, you know, having been in this business for a while, I've seen people publish their books with traditional publishers, let's say Random House, and the book doesn't sell. It just is dead in the water. And that's just as bad, maybe in, you know, in a ways it could be worse than like a 1 month crowdfunding campaign. I don't want to say that there's like tiers of challenges in this business, but no matter which avenue you take, whether you're doing crowdfunding or you're doing traditional publishing or you're self-publishing without crowdfunding, all of these different avenues, I feel like it really does come down to, well, I don't even want to, I just want to say that it's not just crowdfunding that has this problem.
No, you're absolutely right. The life of a self-publisher and traditional publishing, there's a lot of crossover, and the success, I think, is or the failure is very similar. I just saw, I just wanted to point out, Ryan Clater popped in. He has got a lot of great crowdfunding, and as somebody else we mentioned at the top of the hour, James Howell, thank you. Yeah, and I think both of them have done videos that you can find in the archives. Is that right, Jana? So I would recommend those for folks chiming in for tips and tricks.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely want to shout out Ryan as being one of my proponents for my first campaign, pivotal in its early success, and a mentor throughout a lot of what I'm doing. So if you just arrived, welcome. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, Ryan, you did arrive toward the end. We're sort of wrapping things up now. And I do actually, oh my gosh, it's 2 o'clock. I do have to wrap it up now. So thank you guys for staying for an hour and a half. If you can unmute yourself and say thank you, that would be super great.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
everybody.
Thank you.
Really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you, everybody.
Awesome.
It's
Thanks.
great.
Okay.
Nice.
Bye.